bringing you the latest in tax credit news, insight, and analysis. This is Tax Credit Tuesday with your host, Michael Novogradac.
Hello, I'm Michael Novogradac, and this is Tax Credit Tuesday. This is the May 5th, 2026 episode. As our audience on YouTube can see, my guest this week is Brad Weinberg. Brad is my partner out of our Novogradac San Francisco office. Brad leads Novogradac's What's Next Innovation Group, which helps drive our technology strategy, software development, and, most relevant to today's conversation, our artificial intelligence and data initiatives. That's crucial because today we're going to be discussing the use of AI in affordable housing. AI is definitely a hot topic everywhere, not just in business. And it is the focus of my column in this month's Novogradac Journal of Tax Credits. And that column is the first of a two-part series with the second part coming in June. I will provide a link to this month's May column in today's show notes. Now, because of all the focus, it seems it was a good time to discuss AI on the podcast. And it is a bit more expansive than what I do usually cover, but I invited Brad to share his insights on all things AI. Now, in today's podcast, Brad and I are going to discuss the different types or facets of AI, because you hear AI a lot and it can mean many different things. Secondly, we want to talk about security and safety, how important you should be assessing security and safety of whatever AI platforms you're using. We'll give you a glimpse into Novogradac's AI strategy, and probably of most interest to our audience, Brad's going to share some of the ways our clients are using AI. And then we'll wrap up with some recommended practices. And I'll ask Brad some of his thoughts about where AI is headed. So as you can hear and see, we have a lot to talk about. If you're ready, let's get started. Brad, welcome back to Tax Credit Tuesday. I had to go back into the archives to realize it's actually been more than 5 years since the last time you were on the podcast. So this is a real welcome back.
Thank you. Yes, I feel like I'm going back to archives a lot these days as I continue to adventure in Novogradac.
So maybe to familiarize our audience with your work, I thought it would be useful if you started off by sharing some of the services that you provide at Novogradac.
Yeah. So, Mike, you mentioned the What's Next Innovation, the work I'm doing there. And one of the additional things that's important to AI is around data infrastructure, which we're also working on. But as you know, I come from many decades of being a partner with clients working in the valuation group and leading the valuation group in terms of business valuations and real estate valuations. And I still have some amount of client work that I do today. In fact, some of the stuff I'm doing right now relates to topical stuff around OZs and the off-list census tracts and the valuation work that's needed at the end of the year. And then I continue to do work around business valuations and other complex real estate stuff. And what I think is it allows me to really be better at my other part of the job at the What's Next Innovation by being still involved in understanding what clients need and what clients are dealing with. And it also allows me a unique perspective of looking at AI and actually working with AI on a daily basis, from both the client perspective and just also for myself, what we're doing with W&I.
Thank you for that. And that is one of the reasons why I'm so excited that you've been leading this effort for so long, because having your foot in both areas, you really can help identify what's possible within AI and automation and data collection, the rest, what's possible, as well as what's valuable to clients. And bridging that gap that can be very challenging. And you're in a unique position to do that. So let's start with the term artificial intelligence. Describe for our audience some of the many types or facets of artificial intelligence that they should be thinking about as a mental paradigm.
Sure. I think of it as the 3 buckets of artificial intelligence. One is the chatbots that we're all more familiar with. The second thing that people are starting to hear is around agentic AI. And then the third is the bucket where what I call invisible AI, which is where people have been using AI and likely continue to use AI. They might not even know it because it's just embedded in particular software that they use. So if you look at the first component around chat, what's important to understand is that there are products that are created using underlying models, what we call frontier models. And then there are the frontier models themselves. Those are different and often have different purposes and different capabilities. Now, one of the major ones that we see is Copilot from Microsoft. But Copilot is not an AI chatbot itself. It's not a model, frontier model itself. Copilot is actually a product that Microsoft created that wraps really the underlying OpenAI, which is who makes ChatGPT. They use the OpenAI models to create a work product out of that, that really its intention is for creating those efficiency gains. But in doing so, Microsoft has intentionally limited certain capabilities of the underlying model. And a lot of that revolves around context. When you put something into Copilot in the chat, it's not reading the whole thing. It's chunking it and taking a guess at the synopsis of it before it sends it to the back model, the actual OpenAI model. And that impacts it a lot in terms of what it can understand and what it can do. Copilot's real strength is that it's part of the Microsoft 365 suite.
Right.
And so it's everything from email, SharePoint, Teams, and files. And it really creates and enhances the regular workflow that we do as opposed to creating new workflows. So that's Copilot and, what is a product and its limitations. And then there's the actual underlying model, what are called frontier models. And that's going to be OpenAI's ChatGPT. It's going to be Claude. That's going to be Gemini. Those are really the workhorses of what is known as AI. And those they intentionally have much different capabilities than just the products or Copilot. And a lot of that does go into that context I mentioned, the context window, the fact that Copilot doesn't see the full document that you put in. And that's a big difference and a powerful difference where in a Claude, you can put in a 200-page document, for example, it actually does read the whole document and sends the whole document back to the model. So it has much better understanding of what is actually in the document as opposed to what you get in Copilot. There's just a lot of value to that. There's something called a test harness. Not to get too technical, but all this is created a prompt and it was a technical issue related to a local housing tax credit project and put that into Copilot and then put it into Claude. And you do a number of times. So it was just 5 times did it. Copilot came out with a different answer each time in terms of its recommendation. Claude came back with the same answer 4 out of 5 times. And the 5th time, it still was correct, but it was asking about a specific thing. And the previous 4, it just made the assumption. The 5th one, it actually just asked again. So again, having that context and the deep understanding from the model really does make a difference in terms of the quality for any kind of deep reasoning that you get out of it.
Want to go ahead and talk about agentic and then inside the software?
Sure. Well, let me just touch on one other thing around what it means that to be able to have that kind of deep analytical framework. It allows you to do things, not just the conversational, not just checking that document, but it actually, the frontier model is much better at building and creating. And so using Claude and other frontier models, you can create models, you can create presentations in minutes because of the capabilities that you just don't get in Copilot. And again, it's not that Copilot's bad. It's just designed for a different purpose. It's a product designed for a specific purpose, whereas the underlying frontier models have a lot more capability. So I think that's important to understand because I think a lot of people will automatically think of Copilot as being OpenAI because it uses the OpenAI model, and it's not. It's just a product. Moving to the agentic, this is where we really get into a lot of the value. And agentic AI is literally just where you're using the AI to act on a request with specific information. A simple form of agentic AI that we are doing right now is around QAPs. And you have a very discrete data set, and you can use an agent to query that data set. The long term of agentic AI will be much more complex. There you might have a specific request or specific prompt for 6 actions, and it will take all of those actions without needing separate guide. And so you can understand the power that the agentic AI will create. And then, of course, I mentioned about the third one, which was just we all have been using AI in various software platforms, and people aren't even aware of it, but it's been out there even before ChatGPT. I remember one of the things that you and I talked about a number of years ago was related to the baseball scores and how that was all automated. And it really is now just done with AI and natural language generation.
Thank you, Game Changer, with their automatic stories after a game.
Exactly.
All the softball and baseball parents, and obviously other sports as well, which I did actually end up, because I was a game changer, keeping score of the games. I did actually have some parents get upset with me with the story afterwards. Trust me, I didn't write it.
You much like child. What's going on?
But before we get to some of the ways we're using it at Novogradac, talk a bit about, and maybe share some warnings about security and safety using AI.
Well, it's interesting. The early days, the big thing was that they're training on my data. And truly early days, they were training on anything you put in there. But they quickly saw that was problematic as a business model. And so it is true that if you use the free versions of the chatbots, ChatGPT or Claude, they will train on your data. But at any tier of payment, there's ways to restrict it. But most importantly, for what we're talking about in terms of companies that may be listening, it's the enterprise setup now is as protective as any other SaaS product, is any other online tool that you're using. It has the same protection. And so it actually argues for looking more towards that kind of enterprise framework as you're getting into it, and less commitment towards that enterprise framework creates a higher level of risk, because with each level from there to free, you're creating more risk in terms of the data that you put in there. But the reality is that for chatbots, if you're at an enterprise version, whether it's Copilot or Claude or any of them, you have protections. Your information is containerized and there's no training on your data.
Right. Thank you for that. So now if you could share with our audience some of the ways in which we're using AI at Novogradac.
Well, actually, if you don't mind, I want to go back to talk about the security, because that's on the chatbot front and the model front. But where you do have significant risk is coming in the agentic age. You just think about the agentic age, the agents will be touching a variety of platforms that we have in our firm and that people have in their firms. And so the width of exposure is just much larger. It's also a fact that a lot of people don't think through those data protections, and that often the data security often is a secondary thought. And for a lot of our daily work tends to be okay. But as we move into this agentic AI, that's where the risk is. And that's where there needs to be time spent around data governance and data security, and actually planning that for what the agent is going to access, what the agent that is acting with that agent access. So that, to me, that's the frontier of the security. It's not around the models themselves, if you have access to Copilot or Claude, because again, enterprise level is protected. It really is the agentic AI when you're starting to touch a lot of information in your company or your firm.
Great. Thank you for that clarification or expansion in terms of security risk. And now we can turn to some of the ways that we're using it at Novogradac. And obviously you can't be exhaustive. I don't think I would want you to be, but a few examples, please share with the audience.
So I'll start on page 1 of 7. Obviously, we are using Copilot at the firm, and people have found ways to use it. The frequent things that people talk about is, and I've talked to a lot of partners about it, is obviously with email, it's been helpful for simple communication, the quality of communication in terms of drafting and editing and that kind of thing. The other interesting thing is this year, we've definitely found ways to enhance quality control in some of the work we do by using Copilot to help with kind of a last quality control analysis. And then looking at compliance monitoring It's something we've done. One of the other things that I wanted to bring up that I found one of the most useful things is there was a senior member of the firm who had never done pivot tables before. And he had a need for getting a pivot table done. Now, he could have taken it to a manager, or he could have tried to find somebody who did that work. But instead, he was able to use Copilot. And with the minutes, Copilot built a pivot table for him, and he did need that additional assistance. So what you can think of as capability enablement, I think, is one of the bigger things that's come about with the use of Copilot. Yep. And beyond Copilot, that's where with the innovation group, where we're looking at a lot of different things. And we actually, in the innovation group, have access to the other frontier models. We use it in our software development, the cloud code, and it's made dramatic impacts on the efficiencies we have, the type of work we can do. And we are in that process of evaluating what are the things that Copilot can do and what are the things that Copilot can't do. And so as part of the evaluation, we're also looking at what are the other tools that maybe we should have as a firm to enhance the capabilities we have. So that's where we are beyond Copilot and the other models. And of course, we are in the midst of that data infrastructure that I talked about as being so critical, and building that out. And that will be the foundation for the agentic AI that will come. It's not the most fun thing to think about. But before you can get to that 20% benefit of that AI, you got to build that 80% foundation. So we're also very much working on that as a firm as well.
No, thank you for that. And I know there's a number of other efforts that are very exciting that I look forward to see come to fruition.
But also, some people think that's exciting too, but most people don't.
Well, I do think, as you hear from me quite often, we can't get it done soon enough. Not like we're ever there. It's a journey. It's not a destination, but trying to get that up to speed as quickly as possible so that some of the other efforts that are running on a parallel track can stay on track. But let's turn to clients and prospective clients. Share a bit about what you're seeing with the clients of the firm and others in the affordable housing space, how they're using artificial intelligence in different ways. And as I mentioned in the intro, the May Washington Wire report, or my monthly column, which wasn't really a Washington Wire this month, there I talk about property management and some of the ways in which it's being used within property management, which seems like a quick, I won't say straightforward, use case that's very identifiable. And then in June, I expand beyond that with developers and lenders and investors and the like.
Yeah. And before I go in there, I just want to pick up on something you said in terms of wanting to make sure we're getting there. But the thing is, we are still just in the early days of all of this. And that is both scary, but also very comforting in that there are a lot of people that are trying to figure out, everybody's just trying to figure out, just like we are. It's in the early days. There's certainly a lot more heady days to come, but right now, the fact that we're spending a lot of time playing with it, figuring it out, finding things that work, I think is pretty much universal at this point. In terms of how clients are using it, one of the major areas that you actually see a lot of use in is in property management. That's probably the biggest early adopter, and a lot of that really is through third-party software, those products that we talked about. But they're using it for the leasing automation, a lot of maintenance, they're tracking and triaging, and then obviously communications and providing communications to your tenancy and providing information to them through a chatbot type product they can access 24/7. You're seeing that a lot. Excuse me. So that's probably one of the major areas that you're seeing a lot of use on it. In terms of developers and investors, like I just mentioned, it's just early days and people are just trying to figure it out. But some of the areas that we've seen clients work on is actually trying to use it for sensitivity purposes and modeling. So one of the things that developers often like to do is the what ifs. What if I did this? What if I paid that? And they've been using it to be able to quickly, through a chat function, be able to change different assumptions that would provide different sensitivities. So that's one thing we've seen on the investor side. And syndicator side, definitely you're seeing it a lot in terms of the document review. Sorry, Mike, I got a cough.
That's okay. Understood.
Apologies.
Because you mentioned the financial modeling, and there's so many areas I get super excited about with what's possible. It's sort of the whole concept, the whole way in which financial modeling is done. I can remember VisiCalc, and I can remember people saying that VisiCalc and then ultimately, obviously, Excel, that all of a sudden you won't need as many accountants because Excel could do everything so much faster. And it was quite the opposite. Excel allowed you to do so much more and your projection of the rest could be so much more detailed. And I feel like AI can make a projection almost multidimensional.
Yes, agreed. And one of the big things that up to this point has been difficult is oftentimes people want to see stuff in Excel. They want to be able to see the formulas. And a lot of automation capabilities before we got to AI and then even early days of AI, that wasn't a practical thing that can be done. It is today. And you can use these frontier models now and they can create outputs that are Excel with the formulas. I think that's going to be a big enhancement around that. And then I do think just the ability to iterate and do it in a much more quick fashion than we've done. I mean, we know what we're doing, the new markets tax credit models, maybe 50 versions that end up being done. And this will enhance ability to do this more effectively, also maintain the kind of version control and understand what was changed and so forth. So there's a lot that will happen around the modeling. And in a lot of this stuff, you and I talked before about what we're really talking about is limiting tasks and focusing more on finding ways for people to be able to get to their own highest and best use, if you will, right, by being able to use their brains for things other than data entry and things like that. So I do think there's a lot of opportunity to improve on tasks and eliminate tasks. And to me, it just creates higher value for the people you have. And then it's about for all of us. So that means we should be able to do a lot more work. If you're not out there doing that work, then you can go the other way. But the opportunity is this should allow us all to do a lot more work and to allow people doing that work to have greater value in the work product that they have.
I mean, implicit on what you just said is an observation you made many years ago at the very beginning of What's Next Innovation at Novogradac, where you were pointing out that this shouldn't be thought of in the concept of job loss. It should be thought of as in the context of task loss, in the sense that it's not so much that the job in and of itself goes away as much as a number of the tasks get handled through AI and the like. And like you were saying, it tends to be the tasks that aren't quite as enjoyable, a little bit more time consuming, things of that nature, so that you free up the individual to their higher and better use. And obviously leads to productivity, more job satisfaction and the like. So to me, it's a classic win-win situation.
Yeah. And it just goes back to what you're saying about Excel, that Excel didn't eliminate the jobs. It just improved the ability for someone to do their job better. My reference point was Lotus 1, 2, 3. That was my reference.
Yes. So I guess I dated myself a little bit more than you did by mentioning VisiCalc.
We said that on a call just very recently with some younger people, and they just had no idea what we were talking about.
Yeah. That's a more and more regular occurrence for me.
Exactly.
It's not even so much that you weren't born yet. It was how many years you were born. So we talked a bit about safety and security. I appreciated your sort of expansion of the security aspect of agentic AI. What are some recommended practices that you would want to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think the first one is use the enterprise versions if you can, if that makes sense for you. Certainly use at least the paid versions if you're too small to have the enterprise version, because the models themselves are better and you have much better security. You really need to do that. If you can go towards the enterprise model, you get the same protections that you get from any other SaaS service. And it really allows you to take advantage of all the benefits without the concerns around the security risk. So that is one. The other is, I saw another post today around, I think it was another legal case where there was a hallucination that ended up in a legal brief.
Can't believe that. I can't believe how many times I've read that article. It's like, okay, enough already, attorneys, before you submit the briefing. You trust but verify.
No, exactly. And that's, to me, that's like a recommended practice is something I shouldn't have to say, but
Right,
it is
exactly.
view the chatbot tools, the frontier models, as just a really great assistant. But
Right.
I don't think any of us would say we would just take what an assistant did and hand it in as our homework. That never was smart to do, and it's not smart to do now. So treat it as going from saving on the creation side, but maybe you need to spend more time now on the reviewing side. And it seems crazy that you have to say that, but that really seems to be a problem. And I think part of that problem does come from the nature of the models themselves, and whether it's Copilot or the others range there, but they all tend to be very confident. And I think we have sometimes get a little complacent that this amazing piece of software is telling us information and just assuming it's correct because it was so confident in its presentation. And I think we just have to make sure you have to understand that that's its goal, and it still requires the same level of review and due diligence you have on anything from a junior associate.
Yeah, you and I have chatted about that before in terms of the fact that it can hallucinate or make errors doesn't make it an unuseful tool. It just means you need to be verifying it and checking it and the rest. And I should probably have you back on another episode where we can talk a little bit more about ways in which to use it to avoid, because it wants to please you. And if you ask questions a certain way, you're leading the witness, but that's beyond the scope of this podcast. So what's not beyond the scope of this podcast is for you to suggest what AI might look like in a year, the next few years. Oftentimes people say over the next 5 to 10 years, but that's like forever in terms of what could or couldn't be possible here. Right here, we could have, AI operated robots by 2030 and things of that nature. So maybe just go out a year or 2 or 3 and share your thoughts.
My lawn's waiting for an AI robot, so we'll see what happens when that can happen. And just on what you said, though, I'm going to get into it deeply, but prompt engineering is a real thing. So people really should think about how they're using those prompts as they're trying to engage. I think it makes a tremendous difference. And then the other thing I'd say along best practices is what you find is that early adopters, they just go in and they type stuff in. You get adopters have been around for a while, and what they're doing now is they're saving prompts. So they're reusing prompts so that they don't have to recreate it. And then from there, you get people who are creating very simple agents that now know the instructions already, it's built into it, and then you just ask it. And at every level, that just improves on the results that you get. So from a best practice, definitely look towards that. In terms of where AI is heading, like I mentioned, we're definitely going to be shifting from kind of the chatbot to agentic AI. And we will have complexity and capabilities both within software that we provide or software that we buy, and then software that we use within the firm that is intended to be across our own data platforms. So I think that it's incumbent upon everybody to understand that that's happening, that's coming, and look towards our own in-house systems and the data systems that they have, and just spend time on that governance and understand how all things are going to interact. I will tell you that the speed at which these models are improving has gone down into months as opposed to even a year. And so you're seeing dramatic capability increases in every 4 months right now. There's going to be a lot that is going to have capability that we're not even sure what it's going to be. And the AI already is way more capable than what we can do. So what I see is people catching up a bit and learning more and being able to adopt more of the capabilities that are already there. Some of the stats I see that it's for specific tasks, so specific industries, specific tasks. It's generally 20 to 60% of what it can do already in that space that people are using. And so aside from what's going to change with AI itself, I think you're going to see over the next few years, people just learning and catching up to some of the adoption.
No, I couldn't agree more there. I remember taking a class years ago about delegation, and the question was, what types of things can you delegate? and the instructor wanted the answer to be everything. The key to delegation is being able to delegate everything, which we can have an argument about that. But when I think about AI, it's like, well, what can AI do? Where can it help you? It can help you with virtually everything. And it's really getting that mental mindset to be embracing it a lot more. I almost feel like AI first might be something that gets to be more and more popular over time. But as you pointed out, it's not AI first and only. It's AI as a tool because of the replicability and the rest. And I do want to actually encourage our audience with any ideas that you have, how you're using AI. Please send your thoughts to our firm email address, contact@novoco.com, because I'd love to get a list of various ways in which our audience is using AI in the affordable housing space or beyond. And maybe we'll have another episode where we share some of the great ideas that we heard from the audience. Have Brad back to discuss that when he gives another sort of update. I suspect that it won't be 5 years until we have Brad back again. So Brad, anything else you want to share with our audience?
Well, one of the quotes that I love is Ray Kurzweil, the law of accelerating returns. And that's in the 20th century was like 25 years of change. At today's rate of change, we'll make 20,000 years of progress in the 21st century. That's almost 1,000 times more technical change than in the 20th century. So I tell people all the time that yes, the pace of change is accelerating. You're not exaggerating. You're not imagining it. It is real, and there will be a lot of change. It will be where we all go. It's better to get on the train, do it smartly, than to stay off the train.
So thank you, Brad. And to our audience, for more information on topics we discussed today, I do encourage you to reach out to Brad. In the show notes, I'll have a link to Brad's contact information. And Brad, please stick around for the off mic section. Before we go there, I do encourage our audience every week. I encourage you to subscribe to Tax Credit Tuesday, whatever platform or platforms you get your podcasts. So please do subscribe. And also do it for me. Please take a moment to like and comment on the episode. By liking and or commenting, you help raise our visibility and assist others in finding our podcast. And it's a way of saying thanks for what we're bringing to you through the Tax Credit Tuesday podcast. Also, please do share the episode or episodes of Tax Credit Tuesday with your colleagues. I was at a recent event for local tax credit developers, and one of the developers said every time he gets a new staff person or someone, he has them go and binge listen to our So You Want to Be a Live Tech Developer series. So I encourage you to share your various use cases with us. And if you have any questions you want to hear in an upcoming episode or topics we should cover, please email us at contact@novoco.com. Okay, Brad, now let's turn to our off mic section. And this is a section where we give a shout out to others working in the various communities, usually tax credit, tax incentive communities, but it could also be AI communities, to highlight a professional worthy of recognition. Brad, who would you like to shout out?
Yeah, I think looking just internally, there have been some early adopters and some people who really worked with AI and looked at finding use cases. People like Josh Morris, a partner of ours, is certainly one of those people. Susan Wilson has certainly done that as well. And what is great is they also share what they are looking at, what they've learned, which I think is really important as well. And then John Longcloy, who works for me, I need to give him a shout out for his work on creating the agents around the applications, the QAPs. And then, of course, not anyone individually, but talking to clients, exploring with them on the phone about their exploration of AI and things that they're using it for. And we have several clients that are very much thinking about it, working on it, trying to find ways to use it to improve. And so just a general shout out to those that are doing that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I echo your shout outs. Those are very good shout outs. And I also want to restate to our audience, please do share your thoughts, concerns, opportunities that you see with AI. And we look forward to potentially creating our AI series on Tax Credit Tuesday. Thank you for being on the podcast today, Brad.
My pleasure. And hopefully it won't be another 5 years before I'm back on. I look forward to it.
And to our audience, I'm Michael Novogradac. Thanks for listening.
This weekly podcast has been brought to you by Novogradac. Archived podcasts are available online at www.novoco.com/podcast or by subscribing to the Tax Credit Tuesday podcast in iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and Radio Public. You can find related links referenced in this podcast on our website at www.novoco.com/podcast. Novogradac is a national certified public accounting and consulting firm with offices nationwide. Learn more about our professional services at www.novoco.com.